Look at your phone for a second. Not the apps, not the messages, not the endless scroll of other people's highlight reels. Look at what keeps popping up like a needy ex who just won't take the hint. Payment due. Minimum due. Interest charged. Your balance increased. Account update. Every single notification, a little digital hand reaching into your piece. Now here's the part that should make you pause, the part nobody wants to say out loud in polite company. A lot of black folks aren't drowning because they're careless. They're not underwater because they bought too many lattes or didn't read enough finance books. They're drowning because the system is built to feed on pressure, and pressure hits black communities first, hardest, and longest. And the wild part, the part that made me want to make this video? The Bible already warned us what this looks like. Not in some vague, churchy, be nice to each other way. I mean directly. How debt becomes a chain, how the borrower becomes a servant to the lender, and how entire communities get drained slowly, legally, quietly, while everyone pretends it's just personal responsibility. So in this video, we're going to do something different, something that might make some people uncomfortable. We're going to connect three things that don't usually get connected. Today's economy, real numbers, real data, how debt actually works as a wealth extraction tool, and what the Bible says about the trap and the way out. By the end, you'll know exactly what to do next, without hype, without fantasy, without pretending this is easy. Let's get into it. You've probably heard the lazy advice before, the kind that sounds smart at a dinner party, but crumbles the second you apply it to real life. Just budget better. Just stop buying coffee. Just work harder. Just make better choices. Okay, sure. Let me explain something then. Total household debt in the US hit about $59 trillion by Q3 2025. Trillion with a T. That's not a latte problem. That's not a you should have packed your lunch problem. That's a system problem. And here's what was happening while that number climbed. Interest rates made borrowing more expensive than it's been in over 2 decades. Housing became a fantasy for millions of working people. And wages? Wages didn't rise the way costs rose. They never do. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau documented how sharply mortgage rates rose from the early 2021 lows when people were refinancing and buying, up to the 2023 peak area, squeezing affordability to levels not seen in a generation. So when people say, just make better choices, sometimes what they really mean is, pretend the terrain is flat when it's uphill for you. They want you to believe everyone's running the same race. But some people started at mile marker 5, and some people started with weights on their ankles, and some people started with both, plus someone actively moving the finish line further away. Now let's talk about the Bible, because Scripture doesn't ignore terrain. It doesn't pretend everyone's starting from the same place, and it has something very specific to say about what's happening right now. Here's one line that explains the modern trap in plain English. Proverbs 22:7. The rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is servant to the lender. Read that again. Let it sit. That word servant is doing heavy work. In the original Hebrew context, this isn't just about being polite to your creditors. This is about power dynamics, about who controls who. Because debt doesn't just take money. Debt takes options. It tells you where you can live. It tells you what job you can't quit, even if it's destroying your health, your family, your peace. It tells you what emergency will break you. It tells you what dreams get delayed another 10 years. I'd love to start that business, but I've got payments. I'd love to go back to school, but I've got payments. I'd love to be there for my kids, but I've got to work overtime because I've got payments. That's what Proverbs is describing. Not just owing money, but owing your life. And here's why this matters specifically for Black Americans. Because when a community already carries historic wealth gaps, debt becomes a multiplier. It doesn't just add burden. It multiplies burden. Let me give you the numbers. Federal Reserve analysis shows the white-black median wealth gap actually increased from 2019 to 2022 and was over $220,000 in 2022. That's the median gap, meaning half of white households had at least $220,000 more than half of black households. So if one group has more cushion and another has less, the same debt is not the same burden. Think about it practically. One flat tire is an annoyance for one household. They transfer some money, get it fixed, move on with their week. For another household, one living closer to the edge, with less savings, less family wealth to fall back on, that same flat tire is the start of a spiral. Miss work, lose pay, can't fix the car, can't get to work, can't make rent, collections, fees, interest. Same flat tire. Completely different outcomes. That's what the wealth gap really means in daily life. Let me break this down like a courtroom case. Because most people don't realize they're in a trap until stage 3. And by then, climbing out feels impossible. Stage 1. Pressure. This is where it starts. Rent rises, food rises, gas rises, insurance rises, childcare rises, healthcare rises. But your check doesn't rise the same way. It never does. So there's a gap, and that gap creates pressure, not laziness, not poor choices, just math. Stage 2, the bridge. Now debt enters the picture as the bridge, the solution to the gap. Credit cards, buy, now, pay, later. Payday loans, car notes that never seem to end. Easy approvals with terms nobody reads. Personal loans with interest rates that would make a loan shark blush. And here's the thing, none of this feels like a trap at first. It feels like relief. It feels like breathing room. It feels like I'll figure it out next month. But next month, the gap is still there. And now you're carrying yesterday's gap plus today's gap. The bridge becomes the floor you're standing on. Stage 3. Extraction. Now the machine starts feeding. Interest, fees, penalties, late charges, over-limit charges, refinancing offers that restart the clock, collections calls, credit score damage that makes everything else more expensive, and stress you can't even measure, the kind that shows up in your sleep, your relationships, your health. This is extraction. Your labor, your time, your life energy, flowing upward to service debt that may have started with a $500 emergency. And if you want proof we're living in an extraction era, zoom out globally. Oxfam reported billionaire wealth grew by $2 trillion in 2024, while global poverty barely changed. That doesn't mean every rich person is evil, but it does mean the system is structured so money flows up, especially when regular people are forced to borrow to survive. Now imagine that system operating in a community already hit by redlining history, lending discrimination, depressed home appraisals, and limited generational inheritance. Debt becomes a modern chain with a clean suit on. If this is already connecting dots for you, if you're seeing things you felt but couldn't name, do me a favor. Hit subscribe. Because this channel is about black power through truth, strategy, and real-life moves. Not fantasy. Not rage bait. Actual information you can use. And drop a comment saying, I see the trap. Because I want to know how many of you watching have felt this pressure personally. I want to know I'm not just talking to algorithms. I want to know there's a community here that's ready to do something different. Now let's go deeper. People get uncomfortable when you say black and system in the same sentence. They hear conspiracy theory. They hear victim mentality. They want to change the subject. So let me say it clean and clear. Nobody needs a secret meeting to create unequal outcomes. All you need is unequal starting points, unequal access, and a system that profits from borrowing. Put those three ingredients together and let them simmer for a few generations. The results are predictable, documented, exposed. We have real examples of unequal outcomes in lending practices, including enforcement actions and settlements tied to discriminatory markups in auto lending. Not ancient history, recent news. So yes, the market can be unequal even when it's legal, even when nobody's wearing a white hood, even when the discrimination is algorithmic, structural, and hidden in fine print. Now here's where the Bible gets even sharper. Deuteronomy 28 describes a condition, a pattern, where a people keep borrowing, keep struggling, and become increasingly dependent while another side lends and rises. I'm not saying this verse equals that headline. That's not how Scripture works. But I am saying the Bible describes patterns that repeat throughout history. Dependence, extraction, loss of power through economics. And that's exactly what debt does when it's weaponized against vulnerable communities. Let's keep it real and modern. When interest rates rise, everything financed becomes heavier. Mortgages, cars, credit cards, student loans, all of it. The New York Fed's household debt and credit reporting shows balances rising and debt sitting at historic levels by late 2025. So if you're feeling like you're working harder than ever just to stay in the same place, like you're running on a treadmill that someone keeps tilting steeper, you're not crazy. You're feeling the math. And the most dangerous part of debt isn't even the money. The most dangerous part is what debt takes from you that you can never get back. Time. Because minimum payments are basically renting your own life back, month by month, paying for the privilege of existing while your creditors profit from your pressure. 20 years of minimum payments on credit cards, 30 years of mortgage payments, years of car notes that roll into more car notes, time you could have spent building, creating, resting, living. That's the real cost. But here's the good news. Because there is good news, the Bible doesn't only warn you about debt, it shows you how God thinks about economic freedom. In the Old Testament, we see systems like debt release rhythms every 7 years, land restoration principles, jubilee, restrictions against usury and crushing people through lending commands to leave margins for the poor to access resources. The point is simple. God's model is not trap them forever. God's model is restore dignity and reset power. God's economy has built-in release valves, built-in resets, built-in mercy. The modern economy? It has built-in acceleration, built-in compounding, built-in extraction. So what does that mean for Black Americans in 2026? It means we stop treating debt payoff like a motivation problem, like you just need the right Pinterest quote to get inspired, and start treating it like a strategy plus community issue. Because one person trying to outrun an entire economic system alone is exhausting. The math is often against you, but a community moving intentionally, a community sharing information, pooling resources, supporting Black businesses, building alternative systems, that changes outcomes. That's how you fight a system, together. Now let's get practical, because if you finish this video and don't know what to do Monday morning, I've failed you. Here are 5 moves. Simple, not sexy, but powerful. Move 1. Stop feeding high-interest predators first. If any debt you're carrying is double-digit interest, 15%, 20%, 25%, that's not just debt. That's an emergency, not emotionally, mathematically. A 25% interest rate means your debt nearly doubles every 3 years if you're only making minimums. That's not a slow leak. That's a hemorrhage. Attack the highest interest first, not the smallest balance, despite what some gurus say. The highest interest rate. That's where your money is bleeding fastest. Move 2. Build a shock absorber. Even a small emergency fund, $500, $1,000, stops the spiral. Because most debt doesn't start with luxury purchases. Most debt grows from shocks, car repairs, medical bills, sudden job changes, hours cut, childcare emergencies. A shock absorber means you don't have to reach for the credit card when life happens. And life always happens. Start small, but start. Move 3. Audit your payments like an investigator. Most people can't tell you how much they paid in interest last year. They know their monthly payments. But interest? Fees? Total cost of borrowing? No idea. That's like fighting a war blindfolded. Pull your statements. Do the math. See exactly where your money is going, because you can't strategize against an enemy you can't see. Move 4. Raise income in one focused lane. Not work harder. Not hustle until you collapse. Work smarter. One skill you can develop. One offer you can make. One realistic income stream you can add. Maybe it's freelance work in your field. Maybe it's a side service you can offer. Maybe it's finally monetizing something you already know. But pick one lane and go deep. Scattered effort produces scattered results. Move 5. Rotate money inside black businesses intentionally, because economics is not just personal, it's collective. Money that circulates within a community builds wealth within that community. Every dollar has a multiplier effect. A dollar spent at a black-owned business is more likely to be re-spent within the community, supporting black employees, black suppliers, black landlords. This isn't guilt. This is strategy. Every purchase is a vote. Vote intentionally. Now let's talk about the hidden chain nobody wants to mention, shame. A lot of black folks don't lose to debt because they're unintelligent. They don't lose because they can't do math or can't read fine print. They lose because they're embarrassed. So they don't negotiate. They don't ask for help. They don't even look at the numbers. They let bills pile up unopened because opening them means facing reality. They just keep paying, quietly, forever, hoping it somehow resolves itself. I've seen it. You've seen it. Maybe you've lived it. But biblically, shame is not a strategy. Truth is, Proverbs 28:13 says, "Whoever conceals their sins does not prosper, but the one who confesses and renounces them finds mercy." The principle applies here too. Hiding from your financial reality doesn't make it better. It makes it worse. Compounding silently in the dark. You can't heal what you won't face. You can't fix what you won't name. You can't escape a trap you pretend isn't there. So the first step, before any strategy, before any budget, is telling yourself the truth. Looking at the numbers. Naming the situation. Breaking the silence. That's not weakness. That's warfare. Now, the title says the Bible explains it. And I want to end with the promise part. The promise isn't, you'll wake up rich tomorrow. The promise isn't, say this prayer and your debt disappears. That's not how any of this works. The promise is this: bondage is not your identity. You were not created to be a servant to creditors. You were not designed to spend your life paying interest on survival. You were not put on this earth to generate profit for systems that don't care if you live or die. And once you see the pattern, really see it, you can break the pattern. Because the lender's power is strongest when the borrower feels confused, isolated, and ashamed. That's the formula. Confusion, isolation, shame. But when black folks get educated about how the system actually works, disciplined about their personal choices, and unified in their collective action, the trap loses its grip. That's not hype. That's history. Every liberation movement, spiritual and physical, followed that same pattern. Awareness, discipline, unity. So here's my challenge to you. For the next 7 days, track every dollar that leaves your hands, every single one. Coffee, gas, subscriptions, everything. Write it down or use an app. Just see where it goes. Identify the biggest leak, the one expense that's eating more than it should, the one that surprises you when you add it up. Pick one debt to attack with consistency, not all of them. One, the highest interest, and commit to sending even a little extra toward it every single month. Then come back and comment, "I'm breaking the chain," because many of you watching don't need another motivational speech. You don't need someone to yell at you about hustle. You need a plan you can actually follow, and you need to know you're not alone in following it. If you want more videos like this, Bible plus current events plus black economic power, subscribe and hit the bell. Share this with one person you care about. Not everyone, just one person who needs to hear this today. Because debt doesn't just break wallets. It breaks marriages, it breaks futures, it breaks confidence, it breaks peace. But the chain can be broken. And I believe you're going to be someone who breaks it. I'll see you in the next one.